But first we set our motivation, as the Lamas say, but we'd say state our purpose. That's all they're saying by state a motivation. State our purpose, our goal. In other words, why are we here doing this action? That's a really important point. And that's what we're going to be discussing, especially today, with this topic, because the key thing, as we discussed yesterday, the Buddha would say, is the key factor involved in what we think and do and say is the mind, what goes on in the mind, So here, then, let's think, why are we sitting here together to listen? That's mean including me, I promise, to these words as advice from the Buddha, and is advice, and to how to live a better life, therefore to be more happy, therefore to be more useful, really. That's it. It's the simplest way of stating what the purpose of the Buddha's path is. So we're going to listen with our ears wide open. If there is advice that we like and it feels useful, we'll practice it. If not, we leave it there. So that we can, again, develop our own amazing potential so we can be of benefit to others. And we'll just sing our little prayer that expresses that thought, the second part. The first part, for those of us who figure we're already Buddhists, it reiterates our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi Dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog. I think we should have done first, though, babe. We should have done that. It would have been your job to do it, but I jumped in as usual to offer a mandala as a request. So the center, Babe can lead or whatever, whoever's your umze, will. It's like offering. It's really basically offering something as a request for the teachings. That should have come first. So you do your little. So just visualize. Just sing it simply. Visualize. Just piling up all the marvelous things of the world, the things that we all use to make us happy, piling them up and offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, okay? I mean, I'm going to be saying the words, my crummy words, but let's imagine Buddha's channeling his thoughts through my mouth, hopefully. So request the teachings, okay? Sing. Say it in English, doesn't matter.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to also share the
Share it for the Zoom people, yeah, sure. Up there as well. There you go. That's it. A short mandala and a request. Okay, go.
Short mandala off. Om Sahaji Paraki Jokshing Meto Tram Ri Ram Lingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jingdu Mikte Urwayi Drokon Nam Dag Jingla Chupasho Jetsun Lama Dampa Kenam Ki Chukukala Kense Jutsin Tri Jitat Sampe Dul Jetsin Mala Sabke Cheki Shapa Up to so.
Imagine Buddha happily accepting our offering. Hidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. Okay, so what we were talking about last night, the mind being our own therapist, is all the same. It's the part of this first stages of practice, which broadly speaking covers good ethics, You could say that. I mean, in fact, the idea of good ethics is actually the basis of all of Buddha's teachings from here all the way to enlightenment. It's fundamental, you know. And I think even that point alone is surprising in our culture. I mean, we might, you know, when we hear about the Buddhist view of this the bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. And the wisdom wing, we're talking about that. Ethics is part of that. What we talked about yesterday is part of that. It sounds a bit abstract to say wisdom, but that is the consequence. And the implication of that, as we talked last night, is when we're full of ignorance right now and full of delusions and nonsense and see the world through the lenses of our own rubbish, our own fears and attachment and anger, then we're as blind as bats when we don't have any wisdom at all. And indeed, it causes bad ethics. So these are the cause of our suffering now and in the future, you know. So, but what's interesting about the wisdom idea, I mean, we like the idea of wisdom, I think, in our culture. In fact, we admire wisdom. But what we mean by wisdom is a clever person. It'd be a very brilliant musician, a very brilliant scientist, and we admire, and that's marvelous. But I think the really crucial point here, and we're going to discuss it, the huge point, the massive point, that from the perspective of wisdom in our culture, you know, I always joke and say it's true, you can be the best physicist on the planet, but you'd still go home and beat up your husband and children, because we don't even factor in good ethics. Do you see my point? We think wisdom is something completely different, and that's really very bizarre. So from the Buddhist perspective, you can't possibly have the wisdom of seeing things clearly without ethics. It's absolutely vital, and it's understandable. Let's look at that today, you know. And this is really showing us the way to understand Buddha's view of the mind, which is so precise, so accurate, so clear, so detailed, you know. Which is we began talking last night. But let's go into that more, and then look at ethics within that framework, and it'll make sense to us, you know. So let's look again what the mind is. I mean, we all say the word mind, but we really think if we're modern people, we'll point to that thing in our skull, you know. And if we're the Buddhists, completely not. So this is where, in one sense, he's fundamentally different in asserting what the mind is. So he says it's not physical. First fundamental point: if we can prove that Buddha is mistaken, actually wrong, in saying the mind is not physical, then the whole of Buddhism, the whole of the worldview of Buddhism would collapse into a heap of incoherent nonsense, you know, because everything in Buddhism is based on this fundamental point. And again, I want to always stress it. I always think it's so important, especially in our culture, where we come from religious philosophies that assert creators. It's really important to get clear these fundamental differences about the Buddha, you know. So I always quote this too. I say they have these same stories. I think I get boring with my stories, but this one, I just love this one. Years ago in New Zealand, one man who happened to be a scientist, he asked the question, and I always say it, I've never had this before or since. It's the only person who's ever asked it, and it's a brilliant question. He said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Now, it's a brilliant question because it immediately tells us he's speaking from the perspective of his view of religious philosophy coming from a creator. That's what we mean by religion in our culture. It's coming from on high. It's revelation. In other words, it's something you have to be told, not something you can possibly cognize yourself. And therefore you have faith in it. That's the view that's so deep in our being, in our culture, where we have religions that posit creators, you know, Islam and Christianity. But even the Hindus, even though they have the view of karma, it all comes down to this fundamental energy called God, who is the source of the universe. Well, Buddha has no view. He argues with that view. He says that's a dualistic view. It's not reality. And it's on that major point that he diverged in his own direction, you know, and became Buddhism. This is a huge point to even understand intellectually if you want to understand where Buddha is coming from and understand, therefore, your approach to Buddhism. Because obviously, I mean, there I was, brought up a Catholic, and I had faith in God, although for myself, actually, I didn't ever think of God as a creator. So I think I must have been a Buddhist already, but I just didn't know it. You understand? I loved God, but I never thought of him as my creator. So what happened to my thing here? Gallery. That's better. So the whole idea of Buddha is He came out of this incredible Indian system. As a Dalai Lama, I quote His Holiness all the time, he says it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who began the investigation into the nature of self. That's the expertise of these genius Indians, you know. And Buddha came out in that system, and he went as far as he could go, all the way to this incredibly subtle level of realizations from the Hindu perspective, but he felt they hadn't gone far enough, and that's where he diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to his own direct experiential findings about the nature of self and about the nature of the universe, the nature of who we are, you know. So then the Buddha, therefore, is not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. He suggests, he's basically saying we don't need a creator. As Dalai Lama says, His Holiness says, karma, the law of karma, which is fundamental to the Buddha's view, is like self-creation. We don't need being, it's the final dualism, that we don't need to have someone out there who runs the show, basically, which is either the creator, or in here, what runs the show is this little I, this little soul, this little self, this little kind of spirit, this little, you know, person in there who runs the show. There's no view like that in Buddhism. We don't need such a thing. So the whole point I'm getting at here is that he's not a creator. So if he's not a creator, then it's absolutely good question. Who revealed it? Well, I said to him in answer, would you ask Einstein who revealed relativity to him? And of course we all laughed, because of course he wouldn't do that. Because we know, and this is what we mean by science. This whole the whole concept of science came way back from that Galileo bloke, wasn't it? When he started arguing with the Christians, they practically burned him at the stake. He dared to question what God said was true. He dared to question dogma, you know, that came from God, that the sun went around the moon. Or the earth, that's right, the earth. And he found, and here I think it was the beginning, I don't know, I'm not quite sure, but it seems to me, certainly in our culture, of what we now call, you know, science, the view that where you prove something to be true, not merely believe something. And that actually, the point is, and it's always surprising to us, that is the Buddha's view. He's far more similar to a scientist than he is to the Christian teaching. There's no question. So the information that is called Buddhism is not coming from on high, is not coming from revelation, just like relativity isn't. We know perfectly well that Einstein used his noggin, he used his brain, he used his mind, he observed the world right there. He didn't look in the sky and make up something. He observed what he saw, and he came up with certain findings. He then proved them, codified them as laws, and then he presented his findings. And he didn't say, well, I think this is true, but you can make up your... No, he said, I have found this to be true. Here are my findings. But then he didn't say, you're going to believe me. He did not say, this, I have had a vision of it. He didn't say, I had a dream of it. He didn't say, this was revealed to me. No, he said, I have found it to be true. Here's my methodology, and if you can go along and you can prove it to yourself if you want. That's exactly the Buddha. Now, that is a tremendously different view, you know. Tremendously different, incredible. The whole approach, our whole relationship with the Buddha is different because of that, you know. So therefore, everything that we're going to be talking about in this room, that we talked about yesterday, that you're going to hear in this room, if the person is not making up rubbish, you better check up. They might, you know, Bay and people might invite weird people here, so you should check carefully that they're inviting valid people. You should not just believe it because Bay looks nice or she looks nice. No. It's important to check up, you know. So what Buddha's saying then, everything that Buddha's saying is coming directly from his own experience. And indeed, over the centuries, all the literature, this vast literature over the centuries of all the holy beings who've practiced and the methodology that Buddha presented and have proved it for themselves and have become themselves a Buddha, which is the end result of this practice. It's all there for us, up to us, you know, it's up to us. This is a very different view. I mean, basically the Buddha says, don't believe a single word I'm telling you. Just like Einstein would. I mean, we would laugh if you said you believe in mathematics. You don't walk around saying, oh, I believe in mathematics. People would laugh at you. We know it. We laughed. And this is our big problem, because we just, you know, we say, oh, it's science. We say it's science. It's been proven. Like relativity, for example. Well, until you have proven it, it's belief for you. And that's a really important point. Buddha has proven reincarnation, but we just say, don't be ridiculous. But he's presented his findings. There's all there if we want to squeeze our brain and find out about it, you know. So you don't just believe in it. It's not because any kind of moralistic reason. Believing in mathematics is fine. You'll get away with it because enough people have proved it. So you can rely on people.
But for yourself, if you, I always say, if you go to, your mother says, go buy me 7 oranges, you won't be able to do it because you don't know how to count. So believing gets you so far. But actually proving something, it becomes your experience, doesn't it? Your knowledge. And that's the point. That is the point. That is the point. It becomes your knowledge. It transforms your mind, So, okay, the Buddha's findings are, and this is well before the Hindus found this themselves, that the consciousness is not physical. The Hindus also assert some kind of essence like a soul or a spirit, but Buddha doesn't. But there's consciousness or mind. It refers to our grosser level, all the conceptuality, all the thoughts, all the clever thoughts, all the scientific thoughts, all the musical thoughts, and all the crazy thoughts, all the emotions. It refers to more subtle levels of mind, and this is fundamentally important to understand. These Hindus found that. They had this brilliant technique called single-pointed concentration. They developed this that enables you to get this really subtle focus at more subtle levels of your mind that we don't even posit as existing in neuroscience and modern psychology. This is a fact, And with these subtle levels of mind, which in the long term, to achieve the goals that he says we can, we have to access it. There's plenty we can do it already at the gross level, conceptual level that we live at. But this subtle level of mind, and so all the findings about what the mind is coming from these Hindus and then, explained by the Buddha, are coming from the direct subjective experience of these beings in the depths of their own mind. Nothing like that exists in our culture. We don't trust, we don't trust the mind in our culture. Neuroscience, yes. Not this internal process. We think it's too hippy-trippy, But this is exactly the point in Buddhism. So, your mind is not physical. It's used synonymously with the word consciousness, broadly speaking, It is not a function of the brain. Not only not the brain, but it's not even a function of the brain. It works together with the brain, certainly at the grosser level. So I like to put it this way, without insulting the neuroscientists, that what goes on in your brain, and indeed what goes on in your chemicals and your genes and DNA, all the stuff that we can see with our eyes and our microscopes, which is what we think only exists in our culture, that what goes on there are physical indicators of what are going on in the mind itself. It's the best way to put it, I think. So your mind is not physical. Your mind is not a function of the brain. It is not the handiwork of mummy and daddy, therefore. This is the biggest shock, I think, because all of our views in our culture, all of our scientific views, all of our views about the mind, about neuroscience, everything, all of our psychology, all of our therapy systems are all based upon the assumption that they are in the brain, they're physical, and therefore you get them from your mother and father. This is a huge point. And when we get this clear, and at least we begin to let's say and decide to take on board the Buddhist approach, this is absolutely necessary to understand. That your anger, your love, your kindness, your being good at music or football do not come from your parents. This is so shocking to say, but it's all there in the Buddhist literature. And even most of us as Buddhists, if we don't really study the Buddhist view, we'll just keep saying that. It's my mother's fault. I got angry because my mum's angry. I'm good at music because my mum's good at music. No, that's not true. The Buddha, I always say this, my mother taught me music, okay? She was a musician. Well, she came into this life with her tendency to be good at music. And I came into this world with a tendency to be good at music. My mother said so. So then I have conveniently got born to her. So by her teaching me, she didn't give me music. She helped trigger my tendency for music. In other words, whatever's in our mind in Buddha's view is mine, is our own thing. It is ours, and it's come from our past practice, which implies reincarnation. That we come into this life fully programmed with whatever tendency we then express in this life, whether it's to be a pedophile, a multi-murderer, or a saint. They are that person's qualities. This is a very shocking concept, which has no view remotely in modern psychology, obviously, because we don't posit reincarnation. We track back to mummy, daddy, grandpa, and the monkeys, don't we? Not back to the mind itself. There's a hugely different view. Also, if you're a Christian, there's no view of a you before this life. You came out of God's mind, I'm not complaining. There's no you at all. So this view is very, very different. And it's fundamental, it's the absolute basis of all of Buddha's psychology, all of Buddha's view about reality, about karma, and it's implied in all the teachings that get you to become a Buddha eventually. So it's really important to understand this. Don't just believe it. Buddha could be wrong. So could Einstein. Prove it for yourself. The onus is on us, you know. So at first we take it as our working hypothesis. There's no other way. Even learning 1 + 1 is 2. You have to first learn the concept. Your teacher says 1 + 1 is 2. You write it down. Then you go home and prove it in your homework. So you've got to take it as your hypothesis first. You must do that. And then you prove it with your experience. That's the Buddhist approach, you know. So the next thing about the mind, and we were talking last night, you know, you've got different ways of seeing the mind. Different ways the mind functions. One, we can refer to the epistemological model of the mind, which is the way mind works, how it functions. And in the literature, it is totally mind-bogglingly fascinating. Scientists will be so excited to study it, but they've got to posit the possibility they're not discussing the brain. They're discussing the non-physical, subjective, cognitive process itself. It's so delicious, I tell you. But a really crucial one piece that's important here that I'm going to mention, which then we'll go to the second model, which is the psychological model, which is the contents of the mind, which is how we talked last night. We're going to go into that one and how it relates to ethics, you know, what it means. So this other one is so important to realize. We've got, according to the epistemological model, we've got sensory consciousness and we have mental consciousness. Sensory and mental. And they're utterly different. So sensory consciousness, remember the word consciousness is another word for mind and it's not physical. So when we say we say eye consciousness, what we mean is the eyeball does its job, you know. So let's say, look at this cup, we'll use always the same example. My eye consciousness, and we ear consciousness, nose we know that, we say that. But the Buddha's view, spelling it out, eye consciousness is that part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium of the eyeball, the nerves all working properly, the eyelid, all the bits and pieces doing their job, you know. The eyelid is open, the light is on, and so then the eye consciousness can cognize something. The job of mind is to cognize. The job of mind is to know, to be aware, to cognize. These are synonyms. That's the mind's function. So, of course, to cognize what? Well, Buddha says that which exists. You know, that which exists. And that's a crucial point because he's saying right now with all these delusions, we're living in la-la land in relation to that which exists. We don't cognize that which exists at all. We'll go into this. So, we have sensory consciousness, and I always use the same example to show the point. So when I say to you, I'll say to you, there's a pretty cup. So we all naturally assume, don't we, that my eyes are seeing a pretty cup. Well, no, they can't. They're not capable. The sensory consciousnesses, bare bones, they are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition, okay? So eye consciousness cognizes merely two things, shape and color, isn't it? Makes sense. Ear consciousness cognizes sound, sweet, you know, loud, soft, whatever, but they're very limited. But as Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss because we are only the body as far as our modern views are concerned, you know. But the eye consciousness, it's profoundly limited in its capacity for cognition. So then you have to ask the question, if eye consciousness is only capable of cognizing shape and color, which part of my mind is cognizing a pretty cup? Well, guess what? That's your mental consciousness. And that, as Lama Zopa says, is where the workshop is. That's the concern. That's what our work is. That's what Buddha's skill is, that we have to learn to delve deep into the contents of our mental consciousness, which is where all the thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious interpretations, viewpoints, love, hate, anger, All of it is in there, the mental consciousness. And now, when it comes to the mental consciousness, there are two levels at which it functions, a grosser level and a more subtle level. Well, the subtler level, we will never get anywhere near there until we have accomplished single-pointed concentration, where you go to a subtler level, and we'll never touch that until we get single-pointed concentration. And in the long term, that's what we have to get to. But so if we don't have that level, the level we function at, the grosser level, that's called conceptuality. So we live at the level of thoughts. We live at the level of conceptuality. Now, it's surprising to us because, like we mentioned last night, when you say anger, what you see is a person shouting and shaking, isn't it? Oh, that person's angry, we'll say. You don't have any thought. What do you mean concepts? What do you mean anger is a concept? Well, it's just his body that's shaking, the voice that's shouting. That's not anger. That's the physical component, the impact of the anger in the mind, which has been programmed for so long, that is then impacting upon the body, that then shouts and yells and punches, you know. The mind is where the anger is, and it's not in the sensory consciousness, it's in the mental consciousness. It's not at the subtle level, it's the grosser level, and the grosser level is conceptuality. So we live at the level of conceptuality. All our lives, we live at the level of conceptuality. Now that includes clever intellectual thoughts like physics. It includes our emotions, both conceptual. Both conceptual. So, of course, the emotions, the emotional concepts, anger, attachment, love, compassion, they are so deeply programmed in us that they're like, it's like absurd to say they're concepts, but they're rooted in being concepts. They're underpinned by these elaborate conceptual stories deep in our mind that we don't pay attention to until they come shouting out the mouth, you know. And like we talked last night, so we need to develop some kind of semblance of focus so we can start to pay attention to these endless thoughts, like 1,000 thoughts a second. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So we live at the level of conceptuality. So back to our pretty cup. Eye consciousness cognizes shape and color, and I'm really not kidding, but quicker than Google. I know Lama Yeshe said in Mahamudra, the mind's more brilliant than any computer. And you get to discover this when you get samadhi, that quicker than Google, the millisecond my eye consciousness goes here, quicker than Google, my mental consciousness is accessed. And up will come, based upon my memory, the taste that I've cultivated over my life and from past life, out of my mouth will come the thought, what a pretty cup. That's a concept. It's a viewpoint. It's an opinion. Bay will look and say, oh, what a disgusting cup. And then we'll have a war. And she thinks, and this is the trouble. She, like me, I don't think that my view that it's a pretty cup is a viewpoint at all. I don't think it's a viewpoint. I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's objective fact, don't I? And this is where our trouble is, you know. Because of my programming, due to my taste and my tendencies, it will appear to me through the lenses of my attachment, which will then paint a picture that makes it look really delicious. Attachment literally paints the picture of a pretty cup. Her aversion, because it's her ex-boyfriend's cup, so it looks disgusting to her. To her, it will appear ugly. So her aversion is painted an ugly picture, and then her aversion, as Lama Zopa says, decorates on top of this cup characteristics that don't exist in the cup. And my attachment decorates upon that cup qualities that don't exist in that cup. That's the way these neurotic states of mind work, you know. So we live at the level of all these concepts. Now, some of the concepts are valid concepts, and there are some that aren't. And that's one way of dividing all the contents of our mind into valid and invalid concepts. Concepts that are in sync with reality, and some concepts that are not in sync with reality, and they are what the delusions are. They are what the mental afflictions are all about, the emotional suffering, neurotic states of mind. They are concepts, but they are misconceptions. Are we communicating here? It's a very specific view, you know. It's very, very specific, very laid out. And if we don't understand Buddha's view of the mind, I'm sorry, you can't be a Buddhist. If Buddha says you got to get rid of attachment and you don't know what it is, well, how the hell can you get rid of it? You just throw out the wrong thing. If you can't tell the difference between a herb and a weed in your garden and you start throwing out the herbs, you'll be in trouble. You better learn some botany. Same here. Are we communicating? It's hugely important. So we have sensory consciousness, which is basically like dumb animals, with all respect to animals. But we are driven by our sensory experiences, aren't we? The body is so dominant. In fact, in our culture, we don't even think we have anything more than a body, you know? But our bodily experiences, our sensory experiences are so dominant for us. We even determine our happiness and suffering based on whether the body feels good. It's so enormous for us, isn't it? We don't even get a chance to really begin to listen to our thoughts, our emotions, and understand what the hell is going on, you know, and that's our job. That's an important point to start with, you know, the difference between the sensory and the mental. And then within the mental, to know that we live at the grosser level, the conceptual level, and within the conceptual level, you've got neurotic states of mind and valid, virtuous states of mind. Now, the third category, usually they talk about negative, positive, and neutral, or non-virtuous, virtuous, and neutral. But neutral sounds kind of weird, like as if they're not important. But this is why, again, we have to understand these way they categorize in Buddhist psychology. When they say negative or non-virtuous, we don't talk that way in modern psychology. It sounds heavy, you know. But this is a very key characteristic. This is where we get into ethics now. The neurotic states of mind, the negative states of mind, the non-virtuous states of mind that misrepresent things to you because you're seeing everything through the lenses of these neurotic states of mind. And they're all I-based, they're fear-based, they're all neurotic, they're I-based and fear-based, and they're disturbing, they're distorted, they're delusional, and like I said, misrepresent things too, but they're all based on what I want. They're all based on I. So then when we follow those, that's when we harm others. You know, that's when we harm others. So all of good ethics is rooted in these in lessening the neurotic states of mind and growing the second category, which are the ones we call virtuous or positive: love, compassion, wisdom, kindness. They are not at a conventional level. They are not misconceptions. They are valid. So these are odd ways of talking because we don't speak this way in our culture. So that's why we have to learn to understand what Buddha means by these terms. You know, it's so important. The third lot, I prefer to call them the mechanics of our mind. They're all the parts of your mind that you need to function properly. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration. You need good mindfulness. Mindfulness is not a virtue. We misunderstand it in the West. We make all these rubbish talks about it. Mindfulness is a part of your mind that enables you to stay on track second by second, not forgetting what you're doing. That's what mindfulness is. It's a specific part of your mind. It's a conceptual state of mind. It's a thought that's there, and we use it to help us not forget what we're doing, whether you're making a cake, whether you're killing somebody, or whether you're meditating. So these are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but they're totally necessary states of mind. So that's why we have to understand what these three characteristics, these categories mean, because we don't think this way in modern psychology. So this third lot are what help you: concentration, attention, discrimination. Like one of the ones that's there all the time is this ability to discriminate between this and that. Well, you need that in order to look at the cup and go, well, there's blue and there's red. But you need discrimination crucially in your practice when you're working internally to help you distinguish in your own mind between delusions and virtues. If you don't have proper discrimination, you're a disaster. You've got to have concentration. You're a disaster. You can't make a cake if you haven't got concentration. But thieves need mindfulness, as Lama Zopa says. So this third lot are crucial, but they're not in their nature virtuous or non-virtuous. That's why mindfulness in its nature is neither good nor bad. Don't think it's a holy thing to sit there watching your breath. It's not. It's the motivation that makes it virtuous. This is the crucial point. So, okay. So now let's look at ethics. Generally speaking, really, ethics is the first stage of Buddhist practice. And it's mainly concerned with, not even with the mind yet, it's concerned with body and speech, behavior. Vows, by definition, are mostly behavior, body and speech. It's not about the mind. So the very first level of practice, if we study the Lam Rim, I call it junior school, entry level, grade 1. It's all about controlling, disciplining your body and your speech. So as we know, this list of 10 little don'ts that Lord Buddha has, the first 7 are the body and speech. He recommends. This is his basis for ethics now. His view of ethics initially sounds just like Jesus. Jesus has got his little list of 10 don'ts as well, hasn't he? They even sound similar. So Buddha would suggest don't kill, don't take the ungiven, and don't jump on the wrong partner. There are 3 actions of the body. So why would he recommend, this is the crucial point now, why? This is fundamental in Buddhist ethics. This I can't stress enough. It's the same as we mentioned before. If you're a Christian, I asked this Catholic priest, my friend, I always told this story. I said, what is it in Christianity that makes something wrong? Why is killing wrong? In other words, why is it called a sin? What is it that makes it a bad action? And he said it's because God said. And now that's our view of religion, isn't it? That's what we assume is religion, because there's a creator. A creator is a boss who made the universe, therefore runs the universe, therefore says don't do this and do that. So what makes killing wrong, he said, is because it's God said not to kill. That's such a powerful point, I can't tell you. And I think in our culture, we have that view. When Mummy says don't do that, we'll say, why not? And she'll say, because I say so. Isn't it? I mean, that's how we think of morality. God says don't do this, the judge says don't do that, the police say don't do this, and we assume it's because they say so. And that's why we think if they don't see me do it, oh, I got away with it, didn't I? That's schizophrenic. For the Buddha, it's natural law. It's like, you go to your doctor and she says don't smoke. She does not say, and you say, why not, doctor? Which you should do. You should ask her. She never says, because I say so. And if you smoke, Robina, I will give you cancer. That's our view of morality. That is really our view of ethics, isn't it? We're like babies. That's infantile for the Buddha. It's bizarre, in fact. But that's how we feel. That's why we have so much guilt and neurosis. That's how we can't take responsibility. That's how we live in denial and always want to blame everybody else. There's no view like that. Okay, in Buddhism, there are some rules that Buddha did make up. Like, he started his vows when monks started going along the street with their begging bowl, begging for their dinner, and then he noticed some of the monks who were attached to the vegetables would put their rice on top of the veggies so they get more veggies, get more, whatever. You understand, to hide the veggies because they wanted more veggies. And so he had a rule, don't put your rice on top of your veggies. Now, that's not a natural law. That's one of the made-up laws, and that's fine. There are plenty of them. But the fundamentals like killing and stealing, the fundamental ones of ethics, for the Buddha, they are natural law. This is so important to hear. They're natural law. This is why the Catholic priest said, it's because God said. And of course, that would be correct if there is a being who runs the universe. Well, for Buddha, there's not. There's a very big difference. It's huge. That sounds the same, don't kill, but that's the reason. So the reason for Buddha, the reason is the view of karma, which is that every millisecond of what every being in the universe thinks and does and says is the very process itself that produces that person. That, in other words, we create ourselves. The idea of being created by someone else is a wacky idea for the Buddha, and I'm not being rude, There's no view like that in Buddhism. It's just, we don't need it. This is why he talks about continuity of consciousness that goes back and back and back and back and back, and that every millisecond of what we think and do and say programs us. He would have liked that phrase. Sow seeds in our mind that then produce fruits in the future. So we are our own creator. That's the view of karma. And karma is this natural law, a natural law that plays out in the minds of sentient beings. These two, the concept of the mind being not physical, mind being a continuity of mental moments, beginningless and endless, and playing out, and then the view of karma playing out in the minds, this is the absolute central point in the entirety of the Buddhist view of the universe, and therefore the basis of all ethics as well. So ethics for the Buddha then. So then obviously if you're a Christian and you kill and God said not to, that's why it's wrong. So that's why you must then beg God to forgive you. And I'm not criticizing. But this is our view we have in our world. This is what we mean by forgiveness. We think, oh, I did something wrong, so in order for me to heal myself, I have to be forgiven by you. I mean, we use forgiveness in a wrong way, We think I'm not good until someone else forgives me. That's, again, schizophrenic for the Buddha. It's fine to forgive people, but the only way, for the Buddha, killing is okay. For Christians and Muslims and the other people, killing is wrong because it goes against the will of God. And then you can purify it by asking God, requesting God, begging God to forgive you. I'm not criticizing, but that's the view. Well, Buddha would forgive you if you asked him. He's a nice person, but that's not going to fix you. I mean, let's say, Bay's my friend and I'm always being mean to her, shout at her in the mornings and when we go to work, then I get all guilty and neurotic and I ring her up. I'm so sorry, Bay, please forgive me. All I'm doing is misusing her to make me feel better. I want her to get me off the hook, Now, she could forgive me, but if she were really a good friend, she'd say, Robina, of course I forgive you, but sweetie pie, you've got to start changing. You've got to start deciding to stop bad-mouthing me because nothing will change. If I just get you off the hook every time and you do it again, one day I'm not going to give you off the hook. So it's fine to be forgiven. That's a nice bonus. But the work that changes you, that purifies you, is you taking responsibility for that action, knowing that you did it. And this is the crucial point, regretting having done it because you don't want the suffering yourself, and then also regretting it for compassion for her. So it's all to do with internal, So the Buddha says don't kill. Okay, there's two different things here. First of all, he defines killing, for example, as a negative action because it's an action that harms another. That's his definition of a really heavy, the main negative action is one that harms another. So that's what defines it. An action that you do that also is driven by a negative state of mind, we're going to go into this, is an action that harms another. That's what makes it a negative action. But this is the crucial point. Why at the very first stages of practice he exhorts us not to kill isn't for the sake of the person yet. It's not based on compassion yet. That's later. That's the more advanced level. The first reason at the very first level of the basic practice of good ethics, where Buddha says don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, the reason he says not to kill is because if everything you do sows seeds in your mind and will bring future results, and that will then ripen, that will sow a seed in your mind and will cause you to suffer in the future. So the reason to live in vows of ethics is for your own benefit. We've got to get this clear. Even as Buddhists, we don't. When we do the four opponent powers of purification practice, we think of regret. We just think it's guilt. I'm a bad person. I shouldn't have killed. It's absurd. We've got to get these points clear, This is the fundamentals of Buddhist ethics. So a negative action, one that the heaviest kind, is one that you do with your body and speech that's driven by a delusion. Let's say anger. They're the components that then are the components of that negative action and the result is a dead person. That's an action of killing, and that's like the heaviest negative action. So the reason at the very first stages of practice, the very first stages before you even become a Buddhist, you're going to read this little list of 10 don'ts. He recommends you don't kill, you don't steal, you don't jump on the wrong partner, 3 of the body, then 4 of the speech, you don't say words that aren't true, you don't badmouth people, abuse them with your mouth, you don't speak bad things behind backs, and you don't just rabbit on about nothing. There are 7 actions of 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, each of which is an action that harms another. They're the heaviest level because they harm others. The last 3, I like to put it this way, are just Lord Buddha getting us to start to begin to work with the mind. We won't even go there yet. So the very first level of good ethics for the Buddha is good behavior. Just like your grandma said, behave nicely. Control your body and control your speech. But the reason isn't because you'll get punished if you don't, which is the typical view we have, like a baby, you know. The reason is Buddha has found from his own experience that whatever we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind that will produce our future experiences. The next level of detail is that everything we say and do that's driven by a deluded state of mind, attachment, anger, and the rest, that is an action that is harming another, but because it's driven by those, it will then sow seeds in our mind that will ripen in the future as our own suffering. And there are 4 ways in which they can ripen: as a type of rebirth, as a tendency to keep doing it, as an experience similar to it, and even as a result in the environment. And we'll go into this. That's called a complete action of killing. And a complete action of killing would bring all 4 results. And a complete action of killing is qualified as a complete action if there are 4 things in place when you do it. 1, there will be that mouse. A living being has to be there. The first thing has to be the object of the action. And in the case of killing, obviously, it's got to be a living being. And let's say that mouse in your kitchen. The second is your mind involved in it. And there are several parts, but the 2 main ones are 2A is the intention, not motivation, but the bare bones thought, I will kill the mouse. The second part in that second step, 2B, is your motivation. And usually, typically, it would be aversion or disgust or anger. How disgusting. How dare that mouse be in my kitchen, you know? 3, you do the action. 4, dead mouse. That's the complete action, roughly speaking, of killing. If one of those that sows seeds in your mind, and those seeds will multiply and eventually will ripen as many lower realm rebirths. It will ripen even to, as the residual results of it will be a tendency to keep killing, an experience of being killed, and even have a crummy environment, like bad food will harm you, the environment will poison you, it'll be polluted, you get sick. These are the 4 karmic results of killing. And every action, every positive, every negative, every kind of action we ever do can have any of those 4 results. So it's very technical. So the reason why Buddha exhorts us at the very beginning, or suggests, if you like, not forcing us to not kill, is it's for your sake, Robina, sweetie pie. You understand? But we just hear it as he's sitting on top of me and saying, don't kill or I'll punish you otherwise. We can't help but feel that way. And it's so instinctive. It's the function of ego. But it's neurotic and it's inappropriate and it's not valid. So we've really got to know this clearly, you know. But it takes time. The view of karma is not what we think in our culture, that you produce yourself. It's like a joke. But the Buddha, that's why we really start to take on board the view of karma, then we'd pay such attention to everything we think and do and say, just like we understand when it comes to nutrition. We really understand karma when it comes to nutrition, meaning that whatever you put in your mouth will bring results in your body. It's not moralistic. You don't say, oh, well, I'll eat sugar and as long as no one sees me, it won't have an effect. How hysterical. You know, so we are more clear about nutrition than anything. We are rigid in our discipline of looking exactly on the label, exactly what is, and if it's going to harm you, no matter how much you love it, you will not touch it because you know you don't want the suffering results. That's the view of karma. It's self-respect. But we just hear it as punishment. It's absurd. There's no punisher in Buddhism. We've got to think these things through. They don't stress this in the Lam Rim because they're talking to people who are already up. You know, what do they say? They're already an audience. What do you say when you've already got them out? They already know it. There's a way they say it. What is it? You're talking to the choir. That's right. I mean, Tibet all have the view of karma, or it's already in their bones. In India and Asia and in Tibet back then, karma is the natural law that they'd all understand. Just like we accept creator or materialism. They just accept karma, so they don't have to prove it to them. So that everything is, well, all the teachings on karma in the Lam Rim are just based on the assumption that karma is in our minds. But we've got to prove it to ourselves. We've got to think about it, like we have to unpack it like this. You understand me? Otherwise, we just hear it wrong. That's why we hear karma, and it even sounds more heavy than the Baptists, you know? Do you understand? If you hear Lama Zopa talk, he sounds more fundamentalist than the Baptists, ever. He's hilarious. Are we communicating here? We've got to unpack it and see what it means. There's no concept of creator. Therefore, there's no concept of punishment, and there's no concept of reward. Ethics is for your own sake. Of course, the bonus, as Lama Zopa says, the reason you don't kill is because you don't want suffering. But hey, he says, the rats and roaches will have a party because you leave them in peace. So they are the indirect beneficiaries. This is not because of compassion yet. The first stages of practice, the motivation is for you to stop suffering. You are the beneficiary. It's like compassion for yourself. Then you add real compassion to it for others. That comes later. But the starting point, and you could say it's like self-compassion. Buddhism doesn't use that phrase, but we get that, The first reason Buddha exhorts us not to kill or steal or lie, the first reason under good ethics in Buddhism is it's the practice that will benefit oneself. And the bonus is it benefits the people you're with. That's not the purpose yet. This is a crucial point to understand, That's why when we do the purification practice, regret is the first step. Regret, which we just hear as guilt and I'm bad and I shouldn't have done it. No, His Holiness said, no, nothing to do with guilt. Regret is like with that cigarettes or the sugar, it's not moral, not moralistic. Regret is the step when you've discovered you just ate that sugar and it could cause you to get diabetes. The regret is, oh my God, what a fool. I can't believe I ate that sugar. I don't want diabetes. I regret it from the depths of my heart. Quick, what can I do to fix it? That's regret, not guilt, not I'm a bad person. That's all this dualistic view of punishment and reward, which is deep in our ego's bones. But it's a misconception. These are crucial points to understand. So ask me some questions about that, if you'd like to clarify points. It's a huge point. Online, nobody? Are we all clear, everybody? We're communicating? All right, I'm speaking to the choir, am I? I need a tissue, Katie. Can we go to tissue? Right? Am I right? You mean back right. Okay, here we are. I got it. Got it. Thank you. Okay, so this is the basis of ethics. See, this is the thing is ostensibly ethics is about behaving nicely among other people. So we assume it's all about other people. No, it's not. It's for one's own sake first. We've got to get that point. We've got to get that point clear. Then we'll happily live in ethics, not just do it out of resentment, I know, my mother, my Catholic mother used to say, virtue has its own rewards. That's Buddha's exact point. Living a virtuous life, you are the beneficiary. Not just, I'm seen as a good girl. And that's why if we understand this process properly, just our being a nice person, our controlling our body and speech, our not lying and not stealing and not killing, it will bring enormous satisfaction to us instead of the usual neurotic one of I'm a good girl, why doesn't somebody praise me, which is how we are now. We'll be happy to have good ethics because we're the beneficiary. It's the method. This is Buddha's method of how to get happy. This is Buddha's method of how to get happy. Stop harming others. Sounds hilarious to us. Sounds like a mistake, So then, and within ethics then, therefore, the really vital bit where it becomes very tasty is when once you've committed to, say, being a Buddhist, you've taken refuge, you then will live in vows of ethics. Well, Lord Buddha loves his vows, okay? And I think, again, this one we really have to understand properly. We mishear it. We just hear it as usual as somebody sitting on top of us, preventing us from doing something, We can't bear the word vows. It's so ingrained, it's so ridiculous. But I always talk about it this way, and you can see that I'm right. If you just learn to drive a car, okay? If you had to write down, no, even more simply, everything we learn to do, you can talk about it in terms of there being a list of things not to do and a list of things to do. Now, it's really clear, making a cake. There are the instructions of what to do, but you can imply a whole series of things there that are really saying, don't do this, don't put too many eggs in, don't put the fire too high, don't use this kind of pot, don't use that kind of spoon. We don't get all upset and go, don't you tell me what to do. We will happily learn it and internalize it, won't we? Because we know that's how you make a good cake. But as soon as we hear someone says, don't kill, or don't steal, or don't go against the red light, don't you tell me what to do, we get all upset, But this is exactly all a vow is. If you had to write down the number of things you vowed not to do just to drive a car, you would have hundreds of vows. And a vow, very simply, is a decision to refrain from something. And then we have a thing called commitments. You have a decision to do something. And that's how we live our lives. That's how you learn to do absolutely everything. From the time you start walking, eating, doing anything, there's a series of things you learn not to do and agree to do, not to do, and you internalize them. If you forget, when you drive a car, I always say you vow never to put the foot on the brake at the same time as the accelerator. You vow that. You don't say, I'm going to do what I like. No, you don't. You'll explode the car. You just will happily internalize it. Do you understand me? That's a vow. And you're the beneficiary. And so why you take all those vows when you drive a car is so you can become a better car driver. Well, why you take these vows here is so you can become a better human being and a more happy one. We're so used to hearing it in the moralistic way. And that's how it's presented in the world, because we're full of nonsense, That's when people get fundamentalists, don't do this and don't do that, we try to suffocate each other. That's the trouble. So we understand it properly. It's nothing like that, You'd be delighted. You'd be sad not to live in vows. So now let's look at the power of vows. Okay, so now let's say, what Buddha's saying basically is that in order just to get another human life, okay, just when you die, in order to get another human body, you need bucket loads of rich, delicious, non-killing karmic seeds in your bank vault, okay? Lama Zopa talks about the death process in detail in his book, How to Face Death Without Fear. And this is a vital point if you have the view of reincarnation. You're living your life in good ethics, stocking up your bank vaults of good karmic seeds. Crucially, so at the time of death, you die really well. You help your pussycat die well. You help your mummy die well, so that virtuous karmic seeds can be, a particular virtuous karmic seed of non-killing specifically can be triggered at the time the death process starts, which is just before you stop breathing. And that karmic seed of non-killing is one of these, and that will be the one that will program your mind to find a new human body in the next life. You need that so you can keep on practicing on your spiritual path. It's really specific. So how do you accumulate then lots of rich, delicious, non-killing karmic seeds? Well, this is the crucial point about the power of a vow now. It's very obvious when I speak it out, you'll see. So now back to the one of the 4 things in place for any action to be a complete action. So I gave the example of killing. So non-killing, just the same. In order for any action you do of non-killing, it becomes a complete action that drops these delicious karmic seeds in your bank vault, that would then be one of which would be the one that could be triggered at the time of your death, which will give you another decent mummy in the future, a human mother, because the cause of a human body is the karma of non-killing. And then in that human life, you want to wake up with a mind that has no thought to kill. You want to wake up in a life where you will not get killed. And you want to wake up in a life where the food and the environment and the air and the water will nourish you and you won't get sick. They are the 4 karmic results of non-killing. That would be the ideal life to have. Now, look at the world now. There are 7 billion humans. That means at the time of conception, the time of their past life, not more than a few weeks before they found their way to their present mother's fallopian tube, that one of their non-killing karmic seeds from their main bank vault was triggered, okay? And they got the human mother. But look at the rest. Most humans don't have a tendency not to kill. Most humans have a tendency in their mind to kill. Have you not seen the evidence? Most humans kill animals and creatures. Many humans kill humans. Most religions state it's okay to kill, certainly creatures. I was taught as a Catholic that God made them for our benefit. They don't have a soul, and he gave them to us to do what we like with. That's the Christian teaching. Most religions say it's okay to kill certain situations, other humans as well. So most humans have a tendency to kill. Many millions of humans will die young or get killed. That's the second result in this life of past killing. And 3, look at the number of humans who get sick and have ill health. Millions upon millions upon millions of humans. So those humans have got the main result, a human body, but because they haven't lived in vows, which I'm going to explain, they have the tragedy is they wake up in this life, get a human body, but because they haven't purified all aspects of killing, they haven't purified all aspects of killing. They wake up with a tendency to kill. They will get killed. They die young, and they'll have a ill health. That's because they haven't lived in vow. So a person who's lived in a vow not to kill, I'm going to explain why, will wake up in the next human life with a nice, delicious human body, no thought to kill. It will not even arise in their mind. They won't get killed or die young, and they'll have a fat, healthy body, can eat McDonald's all day, every day, and not die. I'm just talking. You understand? So there's 4 ways that karma ripens. And in order to get all 4 good ones of non-stealing, non-killing, non-lying, in other words, to wake up in next life with not just a happy, healthy body, but good tendencies, no heavy negative tendencies to kill and steal and lie, and they won't happen to you, and you'll have money in the bank and have good friends and have a good life. Just that, forget nirvana, forget bodhicitta, forget Buddhahood. It's all rooted in good vows, Let's explain. Okay. Back to what I said before, the 4 conditions that need to be in place to become for an action to be what they call a complete action, which will bring the 4 results, negative or positive. So in terms of non-killing, okay, right now, here we are sitting in this room, okay, and right now we are not actually killing, are we? We're probably not killing at the moment. We're sitting here listening to the teachings. But this is the point now, and this is a bit tragic, because there's no thought in our mind at this moment, I must not kill, is there? You only have that thought if the mouse comes, isn't it? Oh, I must not kill. But every second we're sitting here now being nice people, not harming each other, but we are creating 0 karma of any positive actions. We're creating 0 karma of no killing, no stealing, and no lying, because it's not in our mind. Do you hear my point? So in other words, for an action to drop a karmic seed in your bank vault, your mind has to be involved in it. We're not killing. The mice are out there in the kitchen being very happy. We're leaving them in peace. But we are not creating any virtuous karma of non-killing at this moment unless our mind has a vow of non-killing in it. Lord Buddha says, and they say in the Prasangika teachings, actually, I think Alex Berzin says, that vows are so powerful, they're like a subtle physical energy in your mind that's visible to clairvoyance, something like that. So what a vow means is you sit down when you take refuge, any vow in your own life. If you are just sitting here not eating too much food, there's no real strong virtue because you haven't decided to go on a diet yet. I'm talking ordinary behavior. But as soon as you say, I will not eat more than, say, when I go on a diet called eating less, okay? I've lost about 20 pounds in the last 6 months because I decided to go on a diet, and my diet is eat less. It's a very simple diet. I mean, I think if anorexics can do it, then I can do it. I'm not being sarcastic. It's true. We all say, oh, it's impossible. Oprah says, no, it's not possible. The brain doesn't. It's just rubbish. You just decide not to do it. It's hard work. So I made a decision, I will not eat more than, I have to eat 700 calories a day because I have very low metabolism. So when I have that vow, it completely guides me, everything I do, doesn't it? It's there like standing on your shoulder, and the cake is there and you check. No more than 300 calories, Robina. But if I never make that vow, I will never do it, will I? So when you make a vow, it's there guiding your behavior. We all know that. You get my point, isn't it? So here we're talking these brilliant vows, Buddha's little set of vows. So, you sit in front of someone, you decide to take refuge, you take your vows, like I've been given permission, so I do that. So I took vows, so I've got that from my teacher. They got it from their teacher. They got it from their teacher. And you can track these vows like a power source right back to Lord Buddha. So it's like this shooting this power source through all these human minds to the present. Then I'll give it to somebody else. So that person says, from now until the time that I die, I will never kill. I will never steal. So you put these vows into your mind stream. So then, this is the point now. If you don't have a vow, it's only when you think I will not kill. It's only when the creature is there. It's only if you're motivated by strong compassion. And it's only if you actually do refrain from killing and the end result is a happy mouse. How often does that happen? It's only without a vow, it's only then that you create any karma of non-killing. It's only then that you put karmic seeds in your bank vault. But if you have a vow, 24 hours a day that you're keeping them, you're ticking over delicious, complete, rich, non-killing karmic seeds into your bank vault. You can be walking down the street. You can be in bed with your best boyfriend, having the best sex on the planet. You can be in the pub drinking a beer. But if you've got your vow, it's ticking over every second, virtuous, dropping delicious, complete, virtuous karmic seeds into your non-killing bank vault. Are we communicating? Got to think about it. So we can't, Lama Zopa says, just being good is not enough. Karma is very specific. In other words, it's super intentional. The meaning of karma, the first step is intention. The state of mind that says, I will. Mental karma. Without that, there's nothing happens. That's the meaning of karma. The mind is involved. If you stand on a mouse and you don't even know it's there, how can you say there's a karmic seed planted in your mind? Your mind didn't decide it. That's why, you could have, let's say, the complete karma of not killing. A complete karma of killing would be the mouse is there. 2A, I will kill the mouse. 2B, because why? Anger. 3, you do the action. 4, dead mouse. But if you can also have a mouse. May can have a mouse in her kitchen. 1, there's a mouse in her kitchen. 2, intention. No, she doesn't see it. 2B, motivation. No compassion. She doesn't see it. 3, she stands on the mouse. 4, dead mouse. Well, there's no karma. Why should there? How can there be? Her mind was involved. So this is a crucial point about vows. Without your mind being involved, the vows have such power, Buddha says, that they're purifying your mind every second and putting atomic bombs under your past tendencies to kill. So in other words, you can't get ahead without vows. We don't have enough virtue. So the few times we do not kill, we do decide to not kill. If it's 1 moth, we're happy to save 1 moth. If it's 2, we'll make an effort. 3, oh, I'm sorry, there were 3 moths. I couldn't help it. I had to kill them. I mean, our compassion is very limited, That's why Lama Zopa was so moved one time, our nun, Venerable Pemo, you must all know her, who looked like an old bag lady, but actually was a yogini. She was amazing, incredible being. I remember when I was editing Mandala in the 90s when I was living at LMB, and Lama Zopa would send me letters sometimes from his disciples to publish them, but anonymously. So there's this letter from Venerable Pemo. I mean, people just saw this weird old bag lady who was so strange and looked unhappy all the time and carried a big bag full of nonsense and had to have a second cushion just for her rubbish, She's just like a bag lady and looked neurotic and miserable and would fight with people and moan and complain, But this letter, it blew my mind. I can't tell you. You should all read it. We published it in the Mandala. She was in retreat at Big Sur for a few years, and she wrote this letter to Rinpoche, crystal clear, totally beautiful, incredibly devoted. And she was sitting in the kitchen having breakfast one day, and all her breath stopped. I mean, she's a Tara practitioner, a yogini, All her airs went into the central channel, and she sat there, no breath, and her mind became completely subtle. And then she had this total clear appearance of Haruka in the kitchen. She said, oh, I better ask him for initiation. So she received all the initiations from Haruka over several days. Are we communicating here? That's the bag lady Pemo, Anyway, Pemo, she told Rinpoche one time how she had all this. People never tell me properly, but what is it? A moth was once some little bug, wasn't it? Some little squirmy thing, wasn't it? Doesn't a moth come some little wormy thing? Does anybody know? Who? Caterpillar? Does it? What's the kind? Anyway, all I know is that she must have. When you go up to that retreat place, you've got to bring your sacks of flour and sacks of this and that, and they must have all these creatures in there. I don't know that turned into moths or something. But anyway, she was overrun by hundreds of moths. Okay, so of course, and so she showed Rinpoche that, well, she didn't. She just told him, I'm demonstrating. She'd get a moth, she'd catch it, and then she'd go, oh, many people bless it with mantra, and then release it outside. Hundreds of moths. Now that's non-killing, isn't it? That's incredible. Not just one, he was very moved by that. Anyway, vows. Vows are super powerful, that stay in the mind, that guide you, that drive you, that inform every action you do, and are so powerful. Yeah, without even intention, without motivation, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing 24 hours a day. So we can't get ahead without vows, basically. So what's the question?
About Lama and the mosquitoes.
Oh, I'm sure there's been. Yeah, no, I know all those. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Leave. I don't. Yeah, there's lots of those stories. That's right. All his actions. Yeah, we let the mosquitoes eat his. Yeah, of course. Yeah, when he meditates all night, he'd have his shirt over his head, and he's feeding them mosquitoes. On his body. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So are we communicating here about vows, and I mean, yeah, about ethics basically. This is the nuts and bolts of Buddhist ethics. I'm sorry I'm saying it quickly as usual, but now need you to ask me some questions, please. 11:30. Nearly time for a lunch break. So ask me some questions. Let's discuss it, please, now. Let's discuss it, okay? Yes.
Denise.
Yeah, take the mic. It's good, yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Good, darling. Good. Go.
So a complete karmic action is object, and then 2A and 2B.
Yeah,
are
like the mind.
intention
There's
and
more to it, but these are the basic mind. The mind involved in it, yeah.
Mental action.
Intention to do it, and the motivation that informs the intention, yeah.
And then the actual action.
The
and
actual, you
result.
do the action, and the result, a living mouse. I mean, there's more to it than that, but they're the essence of it. Yeah, exactly. And any action the same, virtuous or non-virtuous. Go on, please. Let's discuss this point. Yes, please, sweetheart. Come on, because a lot of information I've just given, it's very quick. I want you to understand it. Yes, sweetheart.
I wondered if you could talk more about the subtle consciousness.
About
and-
what, sweetie?
About subtle consciousness, and I guess an easy way is like when you take a vow, is any part of that vow operating in subtle consciousness? Is that why it would?
Well, I don't honestly. I mean, I really can't say technically. I can't possibly say technically what's happening. But my feeling is, I mean, it has to be that way. It has to be something imprinted in the mind. That's why they say, Alex Berzin says, they say there's like a subtle energy there that's visible to clairvoyance. So, I mean, the only way I can talk about it is from our own experience. We know, I can't talk about that, but it has to be like that. But we know the power of having a vow, like the one of not eating. If you don't ever decide not to eat or to go on a diet, you won't go on a diet. The cake will win every day. But as soon as you make this vow, and it's right there in your mind, it guides you. So we know the benefit of a vow. It helps you keep on track. We really understand it. I think just experientially. That's for me is what's powerful. But yeah, it has to have an effect. It has to be there in the subtle mind. If clairvoyance can see it, it's got to be there in the mind, definitely, isn't it? Yeah. Well, that's very tasty to me. It's not just some esoteric idea. It's very powerful. But that's the basic point of vows, Rinpoche says. That the only time you drop a karmic seed into your bank vault of non-killing without a vow is when the being is there and you decide not to kill them and you've got compassion and you do the action and the living being is still there. That's not often. Do you get my point? Those four things don't happen often. We can have a thought not to kill occasionally, but you haven't got the mosquito in front of you. It's got a complete action is one that brings a rebirth, a complete action is one that's got all four, and that's one that will bring you, in the terms of non-killing, a human birth. It's the cause of a human body. You understand what I'm saying, people? You've got to have those four things in place just to get a human body. But then to get the three other residual results in that human body of no thought to kill, not getting killed or dying young, and fat, healthy body that the environment nourishes you, that's a pretty miraculous set of conditions. How many humans have those four in this life? They're the ones who've lived in vows. Can you see my point? And this is where the tragic story, the tragedy of having the karma to do negative actions. So the example I use is this fisherman, and it's all the humans that I'm talking about, all the humans here who have a tendency to kill, and the other three, this is the same example. So what happened is, let's say a person who's got a tendency to kill. I always think of this woman and the story I always tell about this woman who came and she heard the teachings from Lama Zopa about karma at Courtin back in the 90s, and she was in tears and came to my room, and she about her boy who'd spent his life being a fisherman, and he died when he was 29 scuba diving. So she'd always just thought he died doing what he loved, and so I was very shocked to hear about karma. And she said, "Where's he been reborn?" You know. Anyway, I said, "I don't know, sweetheart, but go to see Geshe Lama Konchog, this amazing yogi who lived at Courtin." So she went to see him, and it's very rare they tell you what they see. I mean, they're totally clairvoyant. Clairvoyance is a low-level realization, you know. Who's a high being. So she said, she's told him his name, the boy's name, and he even called himself Salmon. He was so attached to fishing. Sal for short. She told him his name, and he said, "Ah, yes." He said, "First, he was born in the animal realms, and now he's in the hell realms." They don't tell you that, you know. But she went, "Oh, no." She said, "What can I do for him?" And Geshe-la laughed sadly and said, "What do you mean for him?" He said, "For everybody." She said, she's not a Buddhist. I met her years later. She said she was very moved by that, you know. Anyway, the point is this is the tragedy about it. So there he is, 5 years old, nice little boy, whatever, 5 or something. Never met fishing yet, so no thought has arisen to fish. So he's got a good human birth, okay? So what happens is, someone introduced him to fishing. So that in the 12 links, the one that's called contact, that's when you make contact with the object, in this case, killing, fishing, it was fishing. So that instantaneously then functions, it's in the mind, it's one of the 12 links, it functions to distinguish to him whether it's pleasing, unpleasant, or indifferent, which is based upon the karma he has got from the past. So contact for him instantly identified it as pleasing. The next link is intense pleasurable feelings, the one called feeling. You either have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or indifferent feelings. There's only 3 kinds. So he had intense pleasure. And the third one, therefore, attachment kicks in and painted a really delicious picture of this scenario. So of course he feels like he's won the lottery. He suddenly gets completely happy, instantaneously sees fishing, incredibly pleasant feelings, and then karma kicks in, attachment kicks in and paints a divine picture. So of course he decides to go fishing again. He's found his purpose in life. Well, that's what we all do. Whether you're a torturer or you're a ballet dancer, you know, you meet it for the first time, you think, that's my purpose, I found my path, because you've got a tendency there, you make contact, pleasure arises, attachment kicks in, and off you go, become a ballet dancer or a murderer. This is the tragedy when it comes to negative ones. So what happened basically is, due to his past negative karma of killing, he'd been in the lower realms. He'd completed that karma. That main karma had finished of that particular round of karma. But because he hadn't lived in vows, he hadn't purified the 3 residual results. So he wakes up in this life with a good human body. He might have had good experiences as well and good environment. I don't know. He didn't live long enough until he's 29, didn't hear enough. But he had a tendency to kill. And that's the worst one. Because he spent his life killing, no thought that he was harming, couldn't see the suffering. That's the tragedy of being driven by attachment to kill other beings. We can see it's harmful if it's driven by anger, but fishermen don't have anger. They love fish. So he, because fishing is accepted in our culture, so he spent his life in those boats, hundreds of thousands of fish dying, and he never saw suffering for 1 second. Because why? Because his mind was full of attachment, which painted a delicious picture that it projected onto those fish. So he never could see the reality of the suffering fish. Do you hear me? This is what's heartbreaking. Let me just finish. It's good. Let me finish. So because he hadn't lived in vows, he'd exhausted the main karma, but he gets a human birth, but then his tendency to kill is so strong, he manifests that, and then he gets killed dying young, and then I don't know about the environmental one. And then what happens? Straight back to the lower realms, because he spent his entire life killing. This is the most tragic of all when you look at the human race. Most humans kill and never think about it, because second, we have no view of karma, you know. This is the utter tragedy. But if you live in vows, you would never have a thought to kill, and you wouldn't even meet a situation in which you feel you are forced to kill. Very clear. To your questions, good.
Yes,
Yes.
hi, thanks. So in the context of fishing, if, let's say you have a friend who fishes, is it sort of our duty or is there any consequence
I
for us
understand, darling, of course, I understand.
if we don't see?
I understand. So this is called compassion, right? That would be compassion. So that here we're talking the wisdom wing for your benefit, and now we're looking at the compassion wing, how to help another person. You agree? So the basis for your decision to help another person has to be, first of all, compassion for them. But second, you have to have the wisdom and the confidence to know it will actually bring result. Do you understand? But our trouble is we get all fanatic and try, we push it down people's throats. You mustn't kill, it's wrong, you go to hell, blah. They're not ready to hear it. They think, just shut up and mind your own business. So you've got to have confidence that they even want to hear your advice or that they're ready to hear it. Do you understand me? And that's the difficult part. Do you understand? So, of course, yeah. But you can be skillful. I mean, even, like say a little kid, let's say you're the grandmother. I mean, you're not old enough to be a grandmother. I'm just pretending you're a grandmother and your granddaughter goes fishing with her daddy, and you don't want to interrupt her there. You don't want to kind of start telling her to go against his father. Do you understand my point? But then you can be skillful. Maybe you can say, when you go fishing with her, you can say, well, darling, why don't you just catch the fish and say a mantra into its ear first and bless it, This will get some virtue. Do you understand? You'd be skillful. That's why that's what I find is so weird. Many people who go fishing save the animal, don't kill it. They like the hunt. It's so weird, isn't it? But the imprint is so strong. It's very powerful. Behind, yeah. Pass the mic. No, back there. Behind. Here. Yeah. What, sweetheart?
Had more of a simple question about
Yeah, go.
not killing. Obviously, in this day and age, like if you eat meat,
You know what?
if you eat meat
Yes.
or eggs or cheese,
Sure.
you're not killing, but in
I
many
understand.
ways, you're
No, I understand. Let's look at it,
contributing to
darling. It's a very good point. But first of all, I always find it interesting to say it, and we're all the same. I never yet had a person who asked the question, what's the karma of wearing leather shoes? But it's the same thing, isn't it? But I think my own personal comment is, we always mention it in terms of eating because we're very attached to eating. And it's a very emotional topic. I don't think anybody cares. I mean, we just get very emotional around eating, very, very neurotic because we're so attached to food. So that's why I think for the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians, the fundamentalist ones who run around trying to bash everybody into shape, it's so emotional because we're attached to killing. We're attached to eating, So I remember, so let's go into it. But I'll just tell a couple of stories first. I remember one time on Facebook, I put a picture of me in Leeds in the UK. And I was at this cheese shop. And there was a photo of me buying kick-ass cheddar, okay? I remember this guy on Facebook, a couple of people got really upset, fundamentalist kind of vegans. How dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese, So I didn't want to be political, but I'd always wondered how many people, I always wondered how many creatures die when you drive the car, like all those billions of bugs, So sure enough, you Google it, someone's done the research, some Dutch bloke, and there's something like trillions per car, per number plate, per whatever, So obviously trillions of creatures get killed. But his response, this guy, was so shocking. He said, oh, you can't help that. That's just collateral damage. So in other words, this is where it's so hysterical. This is my one point, that if we don't eat it, we don't think it matters, which shows us how emotional it is. It's absurd. Do you get my point? I mean, the karma of killing millions of beings is incredible. Even more intense, I then looked up another thing and I saw this Australian scientist who got really fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians. And he talked about this wheat field just outside Melbourne, where I'm from. And he mentioned that in the off season, this wheat field was overrun by millions of little field mice. And he said they're so cute. He had photos of them. He said they sang love songs to each other. But, and then what happens? Guess what happens when they have to plant the wheat? They slaughter the lot. And of course, I don't care how they kill them. But even then, this guy said, oh, that doesn't matter. You can't help it. In other words, it's so irrational if you're emotional about it, that only if you eat it are you wicked. I mean, if you did that to eat those mice, you'd be a monster. But if you don't eat them, it doesn't matter. I mean, that just shows how irrational it is, So when it comes to what I'm getting at, the first point here is, that just by existing, Buddha says, just by existing, we are slaughtering creatures. Our body is a walking zoo, you know. So to think I will never kill is impossible for it to result, because it's not possible. It's by living you're going to kill. So all we can do is begin to have good ethics and decide, well, at least I'll try and not kill intentionally when I see a living being, at least that much. And this is mainly for your benefit. You've got to start living in vows of not killing for your own sake, and at least you'll then start having some compassion as well. But it doesn't mean you're not going to stop killing. I mean, if you start even being a vegan, who eats that rice that's planted in that wheat field? Who eats that wheat? It's all the vegans, you know. But the millions of mice died for them, but they don't care. It's so ridiculous to think this way. You get my point? So we've got to look at the bigger picture. So the bigger picture is, again, karma, if you, any action you do, positive or negative, the more your mind is involved in it, the heavier the karma. So if you just drop $20 on the floor with no intention, but a homeless person gets it, you don't get much karma at all because you didn't intend to do it. You see my point? It's very obvious. So if you just, you could say, if you just you go to your grandma and she gives you a lamb chop and you eat it, how can you think there's much negative karma there? You mightn't even like to eat meat, but out of compassion for your grandma, you do. How can you possibly say you created much negative karma? Do you know something? You just can't. So and that doesn't mean, oh, well, I didn't kill it and I'm happy someone else killed it for me, so it doesn't matter. No, your mind involved in it is much heavier than if it's not. But if you just don't care and you go to the supermarket and you buy the lamb chop and you think, oh, I'm glad somebody else killed it, it saved me from the bother, well, it's heavy karma straight away. So the mind involved is what makes karma heavier. But then second, given that you can't even survive on this planet without eating something and that creatures have died for it. And then the other one is even you can decide. I mean, the main reason to give up meat is out of compassion. So you're the beneficiary, really. Don't ever think, I think it's a total fantasy to think that, you know, I wonder, for myself, I wonder what the tipping point of numbers would be for the number of people to stop eating meat for the industry to really change. Do you get my point now? So, I have curiosity. I think it's a big number. So don't fantasize just because you don't eat meat, let's just say, oh, I'm such a saintly person. No, creatures are going to die no matter what. So, but for our own sake, it's really good to do that and be driven by compassion. It can only be good. So have compassion, there's no question. But so then we have to decide ourselves based on karma, based on our own tendencies, you know, what's best. So ideal would be to live in a vow. So not to kill doesn't mean you cannot eat meat. It doesn't mean that. If you do go and kill the sheep and then eat it, then you've got two karmas. One, the eating isn't the problem. It's the killing that's the problem. So it's very tricky. We've got to look at it carefully, you know. And so then the other thing is, for me, I think in the world, we tend to think that if we stop buying the chickens, then killing chickens will lessen. It could. But the other thing is we don't factor in karma. I always remember in Maine years ago, I read about how the one season there was this kind of huge extra number of lobsters turned up in the water of Maine. No one ordered them. That wasn't out of demand. 10 times more lobsters turned up. So, of course, the poor Maine government, state government, had to spend millions on marketing these damn lobsters. Then all the fishermen lost their money because the prices collapsed. But suddenly, you know, these karma of all these creatures who had the karma to be born as lobsters in Maine just turned up, you know. And the other thing is too, they've got to be the people who've got the karma to work in the slaughterhouses. Maybe the maybe the chickens will stop getting killed, but they'll just go get a job in the pig slaughterhouse. If you have the karma to kill, so there are a lot of factors involved in trying to change the world. And so certainly being vegetarian, vegan is a good start, but that's the main beneficiary of that is oneself, and nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, if you do eat meat sometimes, it doesn't follow that it's negative karma for you. It's much more intricate than we think. You know, it's not an absolute position. Do you understand my point? I mean, my feeling is a person like me who's really attached to meat. I mean, you asked me what I chose to eat. If I had to choose between veggies and meat, I'd always choose meat if I had my way. So for me, it's really good not to eat meat because I'm attached to it. One of my sisters never ate meat. And I said to her, why not? She never said anything about it. She never complained about it. She never politicized about it. She just didn't eat meat. And I asked her one time and she said, oh, how could I? She said, every time I see it, I see a cow. I nearly burst into tears. I know it's a damn cow, but I'm attached to it. You understand? So it's like if you've got attachment to eating meat, it's really good not to, for your sake. But if for her, she had to eat meat because she was sick. But how could you say there's negative karma? So it's more nuanced than merely eating or not eating. Because also it's not a question of just eating. There's leather, there's silk. I mean, silk, creatures suffer terribly for silk. They're boiled alive, you know, these poor little silkworms. So the silk doesn't break, you know. There's so many, I mean, look at all the medicines we use, animal stuff. Do you understand? So we've got to be just very conscious, be intentional, conscious. But eating is just one part of it. Just because we're so attached to food that we go on about it, I think. Do you understand? Yes, I do. Good.
Venerable Robina, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yes, darling.
Going back to the question about imprints on the mind.
About what?
Imprints on the mind. That, you know, when you take a vow, that there's a
Very strong
a
imprint in the
strong
mind.
imprint
Yeah, very
left
strong.
on the mind
Says
stream.
that, yeah.
So when you take refuge vows,
Well, they're not the vows. When you there are refuge commitments, and then there are the lay person's vows that come along with refuge. They're separate ceremonies.
right. So, but I understand from like becoming a Buddhist and you're taking refuge vows.
No, I repeat, you don't have such a thing as refuge vows. You have two ceremonies. One is refuge commitments. The next ceremony right then is the lay person's vows. Then they're known as pratimoksha vows.
Pratimoksha vows.
They're technically not refuge vows. They're
Oh,
vows of individual liberation that come along with taking refuge. And when you take refuge, you have a series of commitments.
right.
The vows are separate.
So those I understand only last for this lifetime.
I've heard something like that too, yeah.
Like if you take bodhisattva
They
vows.
just go from life to life.
Lifetime.
Don't ask me why. I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah,
I've
that's
no
what I
idea.
wanted
I've
to
no
know
idea.
how that
I've heard that,
works. Mm,
I agree. I don't know.
okay. All right.
What else,
Anyone else?
people? Questions, discussion, come on. For our lunch break. Yes, sweetheart.
Okay. So there was this spider in the shower the other morning.
Yeah, I'm sure. We all,
And I was having a conversation with it because I didn't want to kill the spider. So I have a nice drain.
a nice what?
A drain.
Drain. Okay.
You know, and so he washed down the drain. Now, I don't know if he died or.
So did you make him go down the drain, or you didn't try to save him?
No, I did not.
So you let him die. So you effectively,
Well, I don't know. Maybe he made
no,
it.
but then you effectively kind of, you're hoping he wouldn't die, but you didn't make an effort to save his life.
True.
That's okay. I'm just discussing. We're just looking
Yeah.
at it. So what's the question?
When will this karma come back?
Darling, I mean,
So that's what, is that's going to happen today?
sweetheart, it's like everything we think and do and say every millisecond is all what produces the person you become. So it's not just it's one isolated event that'll bring an isolated result. It's this continuous, ongoing, flowing. So what that did first was, okay, you had some thought not to kill it. That's really good. But you didn't go further to save it. You know, you understand? So that was some kind of intent. That was sort of like
Yeah,
an
that was-
absence
it
of
was a
intention.
fight.
So there's something there, yeah. But you did have some compassion, which is helpful. That's okay. But then, so it's like anything you do, if every single thing we think programs the mind right there, then the immediate thing you do, because if you think, well, I don't want to be programmed with a tendency to kill. So right that second, best would have been, oh my gosh, I regret doing that, and I have compassion, and I must purify that, and I will vow not to do it again. Then the quicker you do it, the quicker you fix it. You don't just say, oh, well, I ate sugar. Oh, gosh, when's the diabetes going to come? Well, you bloody will put the antidote in before it does. You hear my point? Did you hear my point? Did you hear my point? Did you hear the point? You don't look like you did.
I don't. Well, no, the point is
What did I
next
say?
time when it comes,
What's to do?
don't do it.
No, I didn't say that at all. I'll have to repeat my answer. You didn't hear me. Are you listening?
Yeah.
You sure? She's crying or doing something. I can't tell what. Listen again. If you know you have a tendency to get diabetes and you eat sugar by accident, I don't know if sugar directly causes it, but pretend it does. So you don't say, oh gosh, now I've eaten sugar. When will the diabetes kick in? You won't say that. What would you do instead? If you caught it straight away, what would you do instead?
Wouldn't have the sugar.
I can't hear you.
You wouldn't have the sugar.
No, darling. If you did eat the sugar,
Oh.
you don't say, uh-oh, I've eaten sugar. When is the diabetes going to come? What would you do instead? Once you've discovered you ate the sugar, what would be your next response? if you did notice you ate the sugar? What would you do? It's a serious question.
I'd wait.
Jesus God, you mean you wouldn't apply an antidote? You wouldn't try and take something to fix it? You wouldn't do that?
To combat the sugar?
Sweetheart, try to be being very ordinary about it. Don't be kind of religious. If you ate a food, can you please hear me? If you ate some food that isn't good for you, surely the thing you could do is try and immediately do something to lessen, to mitigate the result. Do you hear what I'm saying? You'd take something to mitigate it. You wouldn't just sit there fatalistically and wait to die because you've eaten poison. You try and mitigate it as quickly as possible. Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't that be intelligent?
Yes.
Same here. Are you hearing me? Are you communicating with me? She's not nodding. I don't know how to get to communicate with this woman. Now, darling, I don't need you to repeat my teachings. I need her to understand me.
Yes. but I
Come
regret
back
it,
to me.
yes.
Please look at me and listen to me. Thank you for explaining to you. You're so kind. Are you trying to hear? It's a very organic, natural process. If you're discovering that you're driving on the freeway and you're beginning to veer left into the other lane, you wouldn't just go, uh-oh, when's the crash going to come?
Yeah.
Would you? What would you do instead?
Yeah. You're the other way.
You'd adjust your behavior. Thank you. Now you're communicating.
Yeah.
Are we communicating
I
now?
get it.
Thank you so much. Finally got there. So that's why I've got to be conscious every second and then adjust and apply the antidote and regret and have compassion. It's an ongoing dynamic process.
Yeah.
You understand, sweetheart?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you. What else? What else? Questions? Yes? Yes. Yes, darling.
So, similar, I had to put my dog down. There's two parts to this.
I'm sorry. I have to.
Had to
get you
put my dog
No, sorry,
as-
I'll get you. I have to get you to rephrase that.
Okay.
I decided to kill my dog.
Yes, that's.
Thank you. Say it.
I decided to
Not,
kill.
I had to put my dog down. You've got to
You're
be much more
correct.
direct. I
No.
decided to kill my dog.
Yes, and that is what I felt when it happened.
But you,
I felt that was my decision to kill my dog.
okay, fine. So you decided to kill your dog. So what's the question?
How do I remove that?
Okay, darling. Okay.
And- but-
okay.
and-
But we have to look at the whole thing. Let's just go right back to the beginning. Okay. Let's look at the whole thing. Shall we analyze it?
Yes.
Shall we
do you-
analyze the whole thing?
Do you want the second part too, or just one at a time?
What's the second part?
Well, the second part is then I have a very dear friend who did assisted death, and so
Oh, that's another question. Go
Okay.
here first.
and,
okay.
but it was all tied in the
I know,
same.
I understand. All right, go to that later. Okay. This is a very common one for all of us. I think everybody in this room probably killed their pet, right? Haven't they? You really have you? Who hasn't killed a pet in this room? Okay, half of us. But it's it's fairly common in the world, isn't it? Okay, let's look at it. We've got to unpack it and look at it carefully, okay? Otherwise, yeah. Okay, so why did you decide you needed to kill your dog? What was the reason?
She was very sick.
She was sick, okay.
Yeah,
And go on, she was sick.
sick, old.
Lots of people get sick. But why do you think you had to kill her? It's a really important question.
that's-
Why did you decide you needed to kill her? Why?
I felt she was suffering,
She was suffering, no question. She was
and
suffering.
I felt she was very sick.
And she was very sick, there's no question.
And
but why
then-
does the next step come?
And then this is where I struggled too. My feelings, I started to change how I felt towards her. She became more like, there was less compassion because it was a lot of work. It was like,
Okay, you're being very, very honest now, which is
Yeah.
very rare.
Yeah.
So you're being very blunt. Basically, it was a pain in the ass and she was too much effort. So you bloody killed her,
Yeah.
right?
yes, and that's
At least
my
she's being
change.
honest. This is very common, but we can't bear to say it that way because we're full of attachment. What you're describing is totally, it's not being mean, not being like a policeman, but we've got to be very honest, you know. So basically, it's the same with a moth. Happy to save one moth, but 100, 3? In other words, basically it's meaning. It's not being rude. We've just got to be honest with ourselves. Our compassion is very limited. It's the same with a baby. I think if you had a baby that cried all day and night and shat upon you, I mean, I'm not surprised you'd want to kill her. But so if the baby behaves nicely and the dog behaves nicely, then we think we're so kind, but we're not. It's just attachment. Well, if your attachment gets what it wants and the dog behaves nicely, then we think, oh, aren't I compassionate? But this is just showing us nakedly that we're limited. We've got to be humble about that and notice it. So at least you're honest and said that. Okay, I don't want to discuss the karma you had. It's your business. But you fix it. You do purification. I mean, did you do purification?
That's what I was.
But did you do purification?
I did, but
Good, darling. But listen, we got to. It's okay. It's a bit like, so if we use that analogy of, again, the diabetes or the smoking cigarette one, that we understand, that we know. You don't say, oh, I went and oh, what are we saying? Never mind, don't forget that. So we've got to look at it. So we've got to look at the karma. First of all, I think that this really points out one component of our relationship with our suffering pet. Some people have, so yours was clearly, it was just too much effort, and you're being very sincere and very honest with that, which means your attachment stopped getting what it wanted. Aversion started arising, it became inconvenient, it was too expensive. Do you understand? I understand that. But the other one that's very common, that's the one that normally we have people are full of compassion for their dog, and they can't bear the suffering, and they feel so sincere that I have to kill it for the dog's sake. And that's that. So at least, even technically speaking, the karma is, one, there's the object called a dog. Two, and it happens to be suffering. Two, there's intention, I will kill the dog. And maybe not in your sake, part of it was compassion, but mostly self-centered. And being very blunt, it's okay, you said it. But for other people, they would say the compassion was tremendous. So they really did have compassion. So their motivation was compassion, right? 3, they did the action. The dog died. 4, they did the action or had the vet do it. Poor vets these days. And then 4, the result, a dead dog. So you could argue for that person, they didn't create much negative karma because their motivation was compassion. You understand? Just compassion. Do you understand? But the point is, this is the point that we forget to apply, though. The reason that person killed the dog was for the dog's sake, right? Wasn't it? Would you agree with that? It's for the dog's sake. But you've then got to surely ask the question before you kill the bloody thing, I wonder what type of rebirth my dog will get. So if you then realize we're not clairvoyant, we have no clue about the karma of that dog, we have no wisdom, so it's playing Russian roulette with that dog, and it's more than likely, if it's a regular dog, that when you kill it, fear naturally arises. It will go straight to another real animal birth. So how did you help your dog? You put it from the frying pan into the fire. So do you see my point? So from your point of view, the karma wasn't so bad because you had compassion, but you didn't help your dog. This is the point that is really hard for us in our Western culture. Are you hearing me, people? The reason you killed your dog was for your dog's benefit, but you never bothered to find out if you did benefit the dog. And the only reason is because we don't have much view about reincarnation. It's quite hard for us. You get my point here? So as the Dalai Lama says, compassion's not enough. You need wisdom. In other words, if I had a headache, you do have compassion for me, and you say, please take a pill, but you're not sure if it's cyanide or aspirin. Well, thank you. I'd rather you keep your pill and I keep my headache. And then when I'm dying in agony, you say, I meant well. Well, as Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. So if at least you created you're honestly admitting you created some negative karma, your motivation was mainly aversion. So you did a negative action of killing your dog and you've got no virtuous karma for you. So you better purify it, baby. And try to vow not to do it again. That's the key one. Because that'll purify your tendency. And if, or maybe just best don't get a dog. Yeah. I mean, honestly,
I'm at right now.
The number of pets, well, they all talk about this, isn't it? These pets that get kind of chucked out or killed because it just becomes inconvenient for us. Because we buy them out of attachment. I mean, not being mean about us. Are we communicating here? We've got to really see this, So if it is mainly, and some people really have this enormous compassion, are in tears, but also the other point I have to say, even for that person, it's mainly still driven by attachment. And that's a whole new kettle of fish, and I want to discuss that after lunch. All right. So are we communicating, sweetheart?
Oh, yes. That's exactly what I felt was what was going to happen to my dog as a result of my actions.
Well, that's why. Did you get some prayers for it and do prayers and things? You
No, I
didn't.
didn't.
Well, sweetie pie, you
I
should.
know. I
That's
know because
obvious.
it's still affecting me.
Well, then
and-
please just get some for your poor little doggy. At least you're going to do it.
Yeah.
You try to mitigate it, and you get Courtin to do prayers. You say mantras, especially because you know when it's going to die. Right at that time, you invoke the medicine Buddha. You do what you can. You know.
Yes, yes. I didn't
Don't just
even
feel guilty.
think of that.
And when people don't, that's our trouble.
Mm-hmm. No, but that was my
I
biggest
understand.
pain.
I understand, darling.
Where did that dog? Because
Well,
of
that's
what I
not-
did.
We didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I didn't.
The poor dog didn't have the merit. So tell me the second question.
Oh, well, I was wondering how this
me
all
that one.
works because I have a very dear friend and she did assisted living
That's right, exactly.
and or death, and we had a lot of discussion around it, and it's a
You know,
complicated.
it's the whole the same. It's the simple point is that we don't have enough wisdom to know the consequences of our action in our ordinary life. Based on ordinary things like running across a freeway, turning the corner, you will not make those decisions unless you are informed about the consequences. Normal intelligence in normal life, you won't make a decision unless you know the consequences. But when it comes to killing animals, because we don't have the view of karma, we don't think about it. But if we did, it would stop us in our tracks immediately because you don't have the wisdom. It's not a moralistic issue. Oh, you shouldn't kill your dog. It's like you don't want to harm your dog. And if you have the view of reincarnation, then because you don't have the wisdom, you will do everything you can to help the dog be peaceful, help the dog, give it medicine, do whatever you can, say prayers in its ears, because every second it can hear you saying prayers in its ears, it's purifying its karma, and pray that it will have a relaxed, peaceful death when the time is right. That's but then that's the other issue I want to talk about later, because we have so much fear and our attachment is so intense that we basically can't stand seeing the pain. So that's what often motivates us and drives the compassion, even pollutes the compassion. It's because attachment is a junkie that only wants everything to be lovely. And we can't stand looking at someone else's suffering. We think we're suffering because we have compassion. No, we are suffering because our aversion can't stand seeing it. This is a really powerful, we're going to go into this later, afterwards. It's very powerful, I tell you. So the one of killing ourselves, I mean, the thing is, we go through the death process, we'll discuss this later, but when they describe the death process, it's very clear that unless you've got a very special condition of people around you, supported, with a habit of practicing all your life, that naturally at the time the breath stops, at the time of the death process starting, intense fear naturally kicks in for every being. And if you've never practiced, it's going to be 1,000,000,000 times more strong. And especially if you've intended, some people spend years planning their death. I mean, that is the most intense, heavy karma you can ever imagine. How could they be virtuous, you know? It's not motivated by virtue. It's motivated by fear. So how can there be a virtuous action? And the more, people sometimes spend years thinking about it, they say. Oh, I'm allowed to kill myself. How can that be virtuous for your mind? How can that enable you to be virtuous and spacious and peaceful? It's impossible. And we don't know about the death process. We don't know what happens, but they tell us in the text from the yogis exactly what happens. And intense fear kicks in. And that could be and if fear is the dominant one, that triggers a negative karmic seed straight to the lower realms. It's really like going across a freeway, an 8-lane freeway, all going 100 miles an hour, you know. It's an intense time, death time. And needs very special conditions to enable you to be virtuous when it happens. It's really important. Do you understand, people? So we'll discuss afterwards, whatever. So we've got 90 minutes to have lunch, right? Yes? Good. Okay, I'm going to go home. And we'll come back and do that 30 minutes of chanting the names of Manjushri.
Yes.
It's no longer for Lama Zopa's swift return. He's already swiftly returned. So now it's him to get fat and healthy and come soon and have a name and a place so we can see him, isn't it? So we'll do that then. All right, darling, so we would delight. Any information that's been useful this last 90 minutes, 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2 hours, 12, 10. Yeah, 2 whole hours. Anything that's been useful, I think great. We're going to nourish these karmic seeds we've planted by listening so we can develop our marvelous potential, so we can be a benefit to others. Think like that. Okay? So think of your lunch. How are you going to have lunch? What's the plan? Lunch comes here or they go there? It's coming, you mean? There is ordered already. And remember, whatever you do, so think of lunch, think of lunch through the lenses of compassion. Think that people have made this, they've, bought the food, they've made it, they drove it, creatures died for it, even if it's not meat. And all these sentient beings involved in this food. So I'm going to eat this food so I can be fat and healthy, so I can repay their kindness by continuing to work on myself and become a Buddha. Think like that. And then you eat your sandwich with a happy mind. Okay.